By 1918, the European powers had been fighting World War I in the skies for nearly 4 years. Their pilots were seasoned veterans with hundreds of combat hours. Their aircraft were refined killing machines. And now, as America belatedly decided to show up with pilots of its own, the Europeans on both sides bet that they wouldn't even last a week. It probably wouldn't have been a bad wager. The new American 94th Aero Squadron was blessed with the mighty Nieuport 28, a French airplane that nobody wanted and that could often barely fly, as fabric was prone to peeling off its wings. Yet on April 14, 1918, America's rookie pilots and questionable planes finally found themselves forced to the Western Front and climbing to intercept a squadron of German Albatros D.IIIs, the deadly airplanes responsible for destroying hundreds of British aircraft during the infamous Bloody April a year before. Those German pilots were about to learn what Europeans would discover repeatedly over the next century. America's simple farm boys in flying death traps might show up late to wars, but they made one hell of an entrance. From civilians to soldiers. In 1917, as the European skies filled with pilots performing history's first-ever dogfights, the United States was still catching up. But this was all about to change. Eager to prove itself in the new era of warfare, the U.S. rushed to establish its own air arm. Within months, it began forming, training, and deploying aero squadrons destined for combat. Among them, the one that would be first to reach the front, the 94th Aero Squadron. Officially formed at Kelly Field, Texas, on August 20th, 1917, only 2 out of the 160 selected for the 94th had ever worn a uniform. The rest were civilians, gathered from farms, factories, and college campuses all over America, drawn by the allure of the rising aviation world and the call to serve their country. Through the heat of September and the cooling days of October, these civilians learned the strict art of marching in formation and how to salute properly, transforming into soldiers. For days on end, they practiced aircraft recognition, studied engine mechanics, and memorized the protocols of military communication, slowly learning the basics before their true mission would take them thousands of feet above the earth. On October 27th, the squadron boarded the RMS Adriatic ocean liner, crossing the Atlantic Ocean and arriving in Liverpool 2 weeks later. Once in France, the new year gave the 94th their official aircraft, the Nieuport 28, and their official designation as a pursuit squadron. Most of the men had never seen an airplane up close, let alone flown one. However, the delivery came with a major flaw. By French standards, their model was already obsolete. Though the Nieuport 28 was a lightweight and very maneuverable biplane with a top speed of around 122 miles per hour and armed with 2 .30-caliber machine guns, the aircraft was also dangerously fragile. In steep dives, the fabric could peel off the upper wing, a flaw that pilots discovered in combat, often with fatal consequences. For the 94th, it was a flying compromise, just enough to get them in the air, but barely enough to bring them home. But the Nieuport 28 would have to do for now. The hat in the ring. In March 1918, now with equipment, training, and a purpose, the 94th finally moved to the Western Front, the first American pursuit squadron to do so. At Toul, France, the squadron met their new commander, Major Raoul Lufbery. A founding member of the famed Lafayette Escadrille, when he stood before the fresh-faced pilot of the 94th, Lufbery was already a legendary ace with 17 confirmed victories. Over the course of 2 years, the leader had memorized every German tactic and every weakness of their aircraft. The French-born man with American citizenship from his father's side was fighting under the Stars and Stripes. When on base, he spoke with a thick French accent, kept his aircraft immaculate, and preferred a calm, wine-filled night to military pageantry. In the air, he was all precision, focused, disciplined, and dangerously lethal. Right before entering combat, while most squadrons receive assigned markings, the American newcomers of the 94th Aero Squadron were given a rare chance to choose their own insignia. Their choice was bold, a top hat, ringed in bright red, white, and blue, sailing through a circle. For a country that had only recently joined the war, and for a squadron that was about to become the first to take off under an American flag, the hat in the ring insignia, painted on the fuselage of each Nieuport, sent a clear message to the enemy. We are here, we are in this fight, and we intend to win. At Toul, the 94th entered combat immediately, flying patrols over a 20-mile stretch of the front from Saint-Mihiel to Pont-à-Mousson. It was a dangerous corner of the war, where German fighters, flown by hardened veterans, still ruled the skies. It was up to a newly established squadron of American rookies to change that. First victory. On the cool spring morning of April 14th, the excitement could be felt all over the 94th's quarters. The men had spent days waiting for this moment, their first operational patrol over enemy lines. That day, Captain David Peterson led the squadron's first patrol, joined by Reed Chambers and newcomer Eddie Rickenbacker, but low clouds and poor visibility forced them to turn back shortly after takeoff. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Douglas Campbell and Lieutenant Alan F. Winslow remained on alert status, still waiting for their chance to fly, their Nieuport 28s fueled, armed, and positioned for rapid takeoff. At 8:45 p.m., the field telephone rang sharply. 2 enemy single-seater aircraft were heading south and directly toward the American airfield. With this alert, the duo sprinted to their aircraft, where mechanics were already spinning propellers and warming the engines. Now, with helmets on and gloves pulled tight over their trembling hands, they climbed in and took off, soaring full speed as they climbed to intercept. While the German planes, sleek Albatros D.IIIs with their distinctive Mercedes engines, continued south, completely unaware they were now being hunted. Once in the air, Winslow banked hard to the east, while Campbell climbed almost vertically, using the morning sun as cover. Caught between 2 fast-closing Nieuports and surprised by the sudden interception, the enemy pilots tried to split and escape. Campbell dove first, his twin Vickers machine guns hammering as he closed the distance more and more, tracers streaking through the morning air toward the enemy. Trying to shake him, the German pilot snapped into a tight turn, losing speed fast as he did so. Through it all, Campbell held the angle and kept firing, watching smoke begin to trail from the Albatross's engine. Only a moment later, a bright and flaming fire erupted from the fuselage, orange against the pale spring sky. At the same time, Winslow closed in on the other enemy, firing in short, steady bursts, just as Major Lufbery had taught him and his comrades. Though the German dove to escape, Winslow cut inside the turn and sent his shot straight into the still undamaged cockpit. With this, the Albatross jolted, rolled once, then dropped from the sky. Both German aircraft crashed less than a mile from the American airfield, one a burning wreck, the other largely intact. As mechanics and pilots sprinted across the grass toward the sites, both enemy pilots, shaken but relatively unhurt, were quickly taken prisoner. The entire action lasted less than 8 minutes, but in that short moment, 2 young Americans, flying outdated planes over a foreign field, had each shot down an enemy aircraft. It was the first aerial victory for the 94th Squadron, and the first in the history of American military aviation as well. That night, mechanics painted 2 small German crosses beneath the hat-in-the-ring insignia on Campbell's and Winslow's aircraft. And in the midst of the noise, wine, and celebration, Major Lufbery allowed himself a rare smile. Proud leader. The momentum for the up-and-coming 94th Aero Squadron continued. On April 29th, as morning fog lifted from the Toul sector, the alert siren wailed once again. This time, it was Captain James Norman Hall, an author who had fought in the trenches before joining aviation, and young Lieutenant Eddie Rickenbacker, the former race car driver whose mechanical knowledge made him exceptional at pushing the Nieuport to its limits. They sprinted to their aircraft. Minutes later, both men were airborne, climbing toward the lines where observers had spotted an enemy 2-seater, photographing American positions. Though the German duo saw them coming and turned back toward their lines, they did so a moment too late. Hall closed from above while Rickenbacker approached from the flank, a coordinated attack that cut off any escape routes. Caught in the crossfire of not 1 but 4 powerful machine guns, the enemy aircraft was shot beyond measure, smoke trailing from its engine as it spiraled downward. The observer frantically fired his rear gun until the plane disappeared into the forests just beyond Allied lines. Once on the ground, the wind was clear. A Rumpler C-4 shot down, its crew captured, and its plates recovered before they could expose sensitive American positions. With each successful mission, the men of the 94th shed more of their civilian pasts, now thousands of miles away. Through it all, Major Lufbery remained their compass, his experience acting as their blueprint for survival. One of the methods he passed down was a defensive tactic already in use across the front, but which he helped refine. a circling formation that allowed pilots to cover each other's blind spots, later known as the Lufbery Circle. The Major also imposed order in the chaos-filled landing fields, directing his men to circle twice before touching down, an instinctive system that would evolve into the modern traffic pattern still used at every airport in the world. By May, as air combat intensified and spring bloomed, the squadron's victory tally had climbed to 4, and the pilots carried themselves with growing confidence, the war in the air favoring the Americans more than ever. But with every victory comes a price. On the morning of May 3rd, Lieutenant Charles W. Chapman took off in clear skies. His Nieuport climbed smoothly toward patrol altitude, ready to investigate the reports of multiple enemy aircraft crossing the lines. The American engaged a German biplane at 15,000 feet, the machine guns of both planes hammering in the thin air, until suddenly Chapman's aircraft faltered, then erupted in flames. As the burning Nieuport spiraled downward, with Chapman inside it, Captain David McKelvey Peterson, who was flying nearby, pursued the German attacker until it too was on the ground. Though this marked Peterson's first victory, the pilot found no satisfaction in it. That same evening, as the 94th Squadron gathered around their usual table for dinner, Chapman's absence, the first loss in their squadron, was infinitely palpable. Aces and losses. 2 days later, on May 5th, the 94th Aero Squadron was formally grouped with the 95th to form the newly established 1st Pursuit Group, the first coordinated American fighter unit designed for concentrated offensive operations. By then, the 94th was on a path to military stardom. Though the unit was gaining victories and confidence, these gains came at a cost. In the month of May only, Captain James Norman Hall was brought down in combat and taken prisoner. Lieutenant James A. Hill was severely wounded, and Lieutenant Walter B. Davis was shot down in combat. But one loss stood apart from the rest. On May 19, 1918, a German Albatros C.3 observation plane was spotted flying brazenly close to the 94th's home base. Without wasting a single second, Major Raoul Lufbery, who'd been reviewing maps in the operations hut, grabbed his flight gear and ran for his Nieuport 28 as fast as he could. As the Major climbed steadily into the sky, the men below watched in near silence, their eyes fixed on the small silver shape circling higher. At altitude, Lufbery's Nieuport rolled into a tight bank, sunlight glinting off the wings as he angled in for the approach, deliberate and always calm. Above the village of Maron, the German Albatros shifted course, its observer already swiveling in the open cockpit, eyes locked on the fast-closing Nieuport. Not even a second later, the German machine sent tracer rounds through the air and toward Lufbery's wings. But the Major kept coming, adjusting his angle, easing into position to fire. The pilot then made his aircraft dip slightly, closing the gap and preparing to strike. Suddenly, his aircraft jerked as bullet after bullet hit the Nieuport. The aircraft began flying erratically. Witnesses saw Lufbery struggling with his jammed machine gun, unfastening his safety belt to reach it better. But when his aircraft flipped unexpectedly, pitching nose down, Lufbery, now unsecured, tumbled out of the cockpit and into a metal garden fence. Villagers rushed to the spot, but there was nothing to be done. The news of the loss of their commander spread through the squadron. Pilots who'd been laughing minutes before now stood silent, unable to process such a massive loss. 3 days later, under a gray sky, Raoul Lufbery was buried with full military honors, leaving the 94th to carry on without their guiding star. New models. Despite the losses, within a few weeks, the 94th gained the first American aces on European soil. On May 31st, Lieutenant Campbell claimed his 5th victory. Just 3 days earlier, Rickenbacker shot down 2 German aircraft near Billy, France, an act of skill that would later earn him the Medal of Honor, and a mission that brought his tally to 4. Then, on May 30th, he scored his 5th confirmed victory, officially becoming an ace. A 6th followed in mid-June, but his rising momentum was halted when a severe ear infection and fever kept him out of the fight for much of the summer. By late June, the 94th Aero Squadron was the top-performing pursuit unit in the American Expeditionary Forces, with 17 confirmed victories on record and 4 pilots lost in combat. As the front shifted, the 94th began trading in their aging Nieuport 28s for the more powerful and better-built Spad 13. In contrast to the fragile and obsolete Nieuport, the Spad 13 was a sturdier, faster, and more heavily armed machine, with a top speed of nearly 135 miles per hour and twin Vickers machine guns synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. While less agile in tight turns, the new model was excellent at diving attacks and enemy fighting, perfect for the aggressive style that American pilots were quickly adopting. In early July, the squadron relocated to Sens Aerodrome, moving closer than ever to the front. However, the group was shocked to find out that, unlike the tense skies over Toul, enemy activity here was sporadic, and combat opportunities were few and far between, leading to a slow and unsuccessful summer for the men still carrying the weight of Lufbery's absence. While confined to a Paris hospital bed in July, Rickenbacker turned illness into opportunity, analyzing each past engagement in his mind and looking for ways to improve his technique. When he returned to the 94th, Rickenbacker was determined to go to work, turning his men back into a team. First, he assembled his pilots beneath the squadron's aircraft. Looking at faces, both veteran and fresh, he reminded them of the importance of their mission. Rickenbacker then went to the mechanics, rolled up his sleeves, reminded them of his own days with grease-stained hands, and told them their expertise was the one keeping the pilots alive above enemy lines. Finally, he addressed everyone and told them he would stick by them through anything, and that he, quote, would never ask anybody to do anything that he would not do himself first or do at the same time. By late August, with the front shifting and the Germans pulling back, the first pursuit group, including the 94th, was given a pause from combat. The squadron spent these days training new pilots, flying formation drills, and for the first time in months, getting a much-needed chance to rest. The end of the war. On August 30th, the 94th relocated to Rumbercourt Aerodrome in preparation for the upcoming Saint-Mihiel offensive, a major American-led push to reduce a salient and break through German lines in northeastern France. For nearly 2 weeks, flying was kept to a minimum to avoid tipping off German forces about the growing American presence, but when the offensive finally launched on September 12th, the squadron adopted a new tactic: low-level patrols flown under 1,950 feet from first light to sundown. Their role was to strike enemy balloons, strafe ground troops, and hit anything that could slow the unstoppable advance of the First Army. Rickenbacker emerged from the hospital just in time for the offensive, and the ace quickly took to the Spad 13, a perfect match for his calculated aggression. During this campaign, Rickenbacker transformed from mere ace to aviation legend, his tally amounted with stunning speed: 5 victories, then 10 and 15, his skill and confidence growing with each combat. On September 25th, his Spad roared across enemy lines twice in the same patrol, each time returning with a victory. Perhaps most daring were his balloon attacks: 4 massive hydrogen-filled observers that he struck at dusk when they were being taken down for the night, diving through curtains of defensive fire to set them ablaze before slipping away into the gathering darkness. As Captain Rickenbacker added to his numbers, another ace, Captain Hamilton Coolidge, carved his own path through enemy formations. During the crisp autumn days from October 2nd to 13th, he shot down 7 enemy aircraft and 2 balloons, his accuracy becoming almost mythical among the ground troops who watched his victories unfold above them. Sadly, his streak ended on October 27th, when, leading his flight along the battle lines through patches of scattered clouds, a single anti-aircraft shell caused his Spad to plummet earthward, taking another of the 94th's finest pilots from the air forever. Despite the growing list of victories, the squadron had yet to regain momentum from the long summer at Chateau Thierry. Knowing the team was in need of new direction, Major Harold Hartney, the leader of the first pursuit group, knew there was no question who it would be: Lieutenant Eddie Rickenbacker. Lieutenant Harvey Cook claimed 7 aircraft and 5 balloons in October alone. Commanders favored him for the most dangerous balloon strafing missions, especially after, during one audacious attack, Cook targeted a balloon nestled between 2 towering trees, threading his aircraft through this natural gateway 3 times, his aircraft's wingtips perilously close to disaster, until the hydrogen-filled target finally erupted in a massive tower of smoke and flame. As autumn deepened, enemy air activity dwindled to scattered biplanes and small formations, where once the skies had teemed with adversaries. The final days brought poor weather, with the squadron grounded by low clouds and rain on November 11th, the day hostilities ceased. Upon learning of the armistice, Rickenbacker made one final solitary flight. He circled at 5,000 feet, watching from his privileged vantage point. He later wrote, quote, I was the only audience for the greatest show ever presented. On both sides of no man's land, the trenches erupted. Brown uniformed men poured out of the American trenches, gray-green uniforms out of the German. From my observer's seat overhead, I watched them throw their helmets in the air, discard their guns, wave their hands. After the armistice, the 94th Aero Squadron handed over their SPADs and journeyed home in spring 1919. All over the nation, their faces filled newspapers, their missions echoed on radio waves, and the hat in the ring had transformed from mere squadron insignia to a proud national symbol. World War II. During the interwar years, the 94th Aero Squadron unit cycled through over a dozen aircraft types, eventually settling with the P-38 Lightning, a fast twin-engine interceptor with distinctive twin booms, and, at last, a fully American design, just as the world braced for yet another conflict. Following the Pearl Harbor attack, though originally expecting Pacific duty, new orders sent the squadron to Europe. In 1942, under the newly formed United States Army Air Forces, the squadron was redesignated the 94th Fighter Squadron. While the team of pilots, mechanics, and equipment was new, the hat in the ring still meant one thing: protect America at all costs. By November, the men of the hat in the ring were flying directly into combat over North Africa during Operation Torch. From dusty airfields in Algeria and Tunisia, the American pilots took to the skies in P-38 Lightnings, their twin engines howling as they patrolled Mediterranean coastlines and escorted bombers deep into enemy territory. There, the squadron engaged countless Luftwaffe aces who had already proven their abilities over Spain and Poland. The 94th participated in the brutal air campaign over Pantelleria Island, helping force the first surrender of enemy territory due to air power alone. As the Allied push continued through Sicily and into the Italian mainland, the squadron flew countless sorties through heavy flak and against determined opposition. Among their most dangerous missions were the escort flights to Ploiești, Romania, when, during the record-breaking and sweltering summer of 1943, the 94th P-38s teamed up with a group of B-24 Liberators on the long journey to strike Hitler's vital oil refineries. Flying at the edge of their range, pilots navigated through mountains and fought off waves of Romanian and German interceptors, often returning with aircraft riddled with bullet holes and damaged engines smoking, but their pride still standing. By the end of the war, the now iconic 94th Air Squadron had 2 Presidential Distinguished Unit citations, 6 official aces, and credit for destroying 124 Axis aircraft. Just as the conflict was about to end, Major Edward Leclerc, the unit's leader, with a skill and leadership style reminiscent of Lufbery and Ace of Aces Rickenbacker, was able to fly 2 of the very first operational sorties of the upcoming Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, getting a glimpse of aviation's latest venture, jet aircraft. The Coldest War. As the United States and the Soviet Union shifted alliances and pilots traded their propellers for jet engines, the Cold War transformed the 94th once again, now part of the United States Air Force, training with the now-established P-80 Shooting Star at March Air Force Base in California. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the squadron continued to evolve with aviation technology, mastering the F-86 Sabre, a nimble swept-wing fighter made famous in Korea, the F-102 Delta Dagger, America's first supersonic interceptor with delta wings and radar-guided missiles, and the F-106 Delta Dart, a refined high-speed interceptor built to engage Soviet bombers at altitude. It was exactly this precision that earned them victory at the 1956 Worldwide Rocket Firing Meet in Arizona. By then, however, dogfights were a thing of the past. Nonetheless, when Soviet bombers probed American airspace, pilots of the 94th flew countless intercept missions over the frigid Bering Sea. Even during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962, the squadron deployed to Florida within hours, maintaining continuous combat air patrols that set records for F-106 flight time. In the early 1970s, the squadron was redesignated the 94th Tactical Fighter Squadron under the 1st Tactical Fighter Wing. The unit transitioned from interceptors to the versatile F-4E Phantom II, a 2-seat twin-engine fighter capable of both air-to-air and ground attack missions. Only 4 years later, they began flying the F-15 Eagle, a state-of-the-art air superiority fighter with cutting-edge radar and unmatched climb performance, achieving full combat readiness by early 1977. During the Gulf War, the 94th pilots served in only specific and individual cases, augmenting other squadrons in combat. Throughout the 1990s, They patrolled Iraqi skies, enforcing United Nations sanctions and skillfully evading enemy fire without a single loss. After the September 11th attacks, the now nearly century-old Hat-in-the-Rings mission evolved once more, as the squadron that had defended France in 1918 now guarded America's eastern seaboard. Full circle. In the mid-2000s, following their last ever flight aboard their F-15s, pilots gathered on Langley's sun-baked tarmac to welcome their newest charge, the F-22 Raptor, an ultra-modern aircraft with sleek lines and unprecedented capabilities, making the 94th only the second operational squadron entrusted with America's most advanced fighter. In 2011, the men and women of the 94th took their F-22 Raptors into combat for the first operational deployment to the Central Command region. Over the war-torn landscapes of Iraq and Syria, these aircraft brought advanced capabilities to the fight against ISIS, including the combat debut of the small-diameter bomb from the F-22 platform. On March 6, 2025, the Mitchell Trophy Air Race, a speed-based air race competition between top fighter squadrons, returned after an 88-year absence. The morning air at Langley Air Force Base carried a familiar electricity from decades before, albeit the race looked considerably different this time. Instead of fabric-covered biplanes, F-22 Raptors lined the tarmac. Where pilots once flew open cockpit machines at 130 miles per hour, now they commanded aircraft capable of twice the speed of sound. That day's trek, a 446 nautical mile course from Virginia to Michigan and back, would have seemed impossibly vast to the original racers. During the race, Lieutenant Colonel Devil, the 94th Fighter Squadron's commander, following in the footsteps of so many legendary men before him, secured victory for the Hat-in-the-Ring. Following a very demanding course, he landed at Selfridge, personally refueled and relaunched his jet, then ran 1.6 miles to sign a historical logbook at the base museum. According to Colonel Brendan Tellez, 1st Fighter Wing commander, quote, "The Mitchell Trophy Air Race is a proud tradition. It honors the heritage of our predecessors while ensuring our airmen remain ready and lethal in the face of any challenge. Today, the pilots who wear the Hat-in-the-Ring patch form a battle-tested team, standing ready for national security missions across the globe. More than a century after Lufbery, Rickenbacker, Hill, Campbell, Coolidge, and their comrades took to the skies over France, their spirit lives on."